Help Action Needed, a D&D podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Help Action Needed, a D&D podcast. My name is Sean Hardy, and before we get going any further, I'd like to invite the rest of the cast to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kate Pizarczyk-Johnson, and I play Nori.
I'm Dan Johnson, and I play Cass.
I'm Julie Perez, and I play Frog.
Great. And so, at the end of the last episode, our players were at a party for the engagement celebration of Prince Dion, head of Solana and prince of the country of Aelith, to his boyfriend, now fiance, Julian, one of the well-known bards in the area. At the party, the players were able to meet a lot of well-known heads of figures, heads of houses. You met several nobles, you met some heads of countries, you met the Druid Circle for the first time, as well as some strange appearances, one from Titania, the head of the fairies, and one from Miss Amy Katonic, who just kind of has her own vibe. She's doing things. What's weird about her? Nothing. Why do you keep asking? From then, there was an announcement that the head of the church, High Cleric Tig, had died, and that James Whitmore would be replacing him, and then they kind of had to end the party a little bit early. You all are now going to be joined 1 week later, but before we get into this episode, our players have engaged in some downtime activities. So let's hear, players, what you've been up to the last week, and I think Frog, let's go ahead and start with you.
To start off her little 5-day journey, Frog traveled to go see crazy wizard lady
Valeria Diaz.
To learn some new spells and kind of get better at some of her older ones. So she headed over there and learned how to fly, most importantly. And then she also spent some time following around Jarl's. She was able to find some information on where he lives, kind of what his day-to-day, what he does, just to kind of, get the stitch on him, figure out what's going on there. And then she did some performing. She performed at some local taverns, and then was able to open for Julian as well.
Yeah, and I think the night that would stand out to you most, Frog, would probably be like last night in World, which would have been like the end of the week. You kind of had your performances like Monday and Tuesday in your taverns that you all got to know and everything. And then Julian kind of came to one and saw, and I was like, yeah, you really, like, why not? I haven't had an opening act in a while, and invited you on. So it was your third night performing, doing the set list, and like you get a really nice crowd. Everyone's been really supportive of you. You've been like really focusing on your instruments more than like your sleight of hand stuff, and so it's like a cool new medium for you to explore. And in the crowd, right between your transition, like when you're leaving the stage and Julian's coming out, there's like a lady there with like long blonde hair, very like white skin, who appears to be very drunk and just starts screaming a lot of things about how Julian doesn't deserve his position, how Dion could never actually care for him, about how he's just like a random boy toy that's been picked up. And you see her like very quickly extorted is a nice word, but like pulled out of the audience and out of the amphitheater as Julian goes on. But you can kind of tell, like, post-show, he's rather shaken as he's coming back up to you. What do you think you would do?
Frog would check in on Julian and kind of be like, don't listen to whatever she says, like, this isn't true, you know that, she's just drunk and is jealous or whatever. But she'd kind of also file that in her memory just to be like, I wonder if there's any truth to any of this. Could Dion be something that he's not? Like, is he part of this Jarl's? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think as Frog is considering like those sorts of thoughts, you also like cast your mind back to like how hurt Julian looks right now, but also like the party a week ago, and like every time we've seen them interact and every kind of like story he's shared with you throughout the week, and you can tell that that's not something that would be going on. Like you get a pretty strong feeling, and also like you've been here a lot and you know how much the people in town like kind of uphold Dion. So for him to like be using someone in that way is very out of character for him. It could be going on. Like, I don't know if that entirely shakes the thought for Frog because of how much you're invested in finding things out, but you feel pretty confident that wouldn't be what's going on here. But Julian does say to you, like, yeah, I know, like, it's one of those things where when you don't really come from much but get to a position of fame and power and importance, people will make comments for anything about, like, oh, of course the prince wants the bards on his side, or oh, of course you'll sing more about him if you're in his bed, or of course you're the one he picked versus this person. It's kind of hard to shake those thoughts when you hear them from people constantly, no matter how long you've been playing for. And that's Priscilla. Like, he kind of lets you know that Priscilla is Dion's like ex from several years ago. They were childhood friends. Like, people kind of assumed they would like end up together because of how close they were. But when it became clear to like everyone, but really Dion, how much Priscilla like cared more about the crown and the status than him and their actual relationship, he left her. And then it was a few years later that he met Julian, but she's clearly still holding a grudge about it. And you kind of see like him just kind of sit in a moment of like understanding that, like, no matter how much he kind of reclaims who he is and how much he moves on, the fact that people don't know his past and the fact that people kind of just don't know him as much as you would is never really out of his mind. But then like there are people that start doing an encore and applause and calling for all that, and you just kind of see him really quickly like throw back on a mask of like, I can't let people see me upset because I'm the one that's supposed to make people feel good, and kind of jokes like, hey, like, these will help you more than they'll help me. And he pulls 2 rings off of his fingers and gives them to you. And he's like, my show, my name carries, you're still working on it. And like kind of gives you a wink to give you like a little bardic inspiration, and gives you 2 magic rings that you see him use like a lot in his show that you can kind of use in your own show to make yourself a little more flashy.
Yay!
I think Nori will go next.
Cool. Nori, what have you been up to?
So Nori was up to some mischievous things. Primarily 3 things. Nori went and met with Kimana to talk about being a fae in the human land and to learn maybe about some fun druid magic. She went to go see Magnus to also learn cleric magic, and then she ended up finding her way into a library and found some very interesting books. And then finally she sat at the seat of the Fae Court and attempted to commune with Tatiana.
Yeah. And as you're sitting there, like walking in, it's the first time a Fae's like been in the court in a very long time, for any extended period of time. You kind of see like the flowers that are maintained grow a little bit better. Some of like the air seems to taste a little bit sweeter. It's almost like this place is coming back to life as there's like an active Fae in there. And on the ceiling there's like a big like reflecting mirror. And when you kind of like focus your attention up on your silver pine cone and think about like what you're trying to get out of this, what you're trying to do, you see like a picture of a full moon appear across that mirror, and then it eclipses itself, and like in the eclipse you just see Titania's face appear, and she looks down at you and is like, hello, my child. You may ask 3 questions of me.
Nori, with all of her giddiness on the inside, tried to remain as calm, cool, and collective as possible, but a little bit, like a little sound, kind of fell out of her mouth before she asked her first question after taking a moment to think about it. And she asked the one question of, why did Tatiana show up at the engagement party?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to that, she would respond like, it is tradition for the head of the Fae Court to bless any wedding of a Fae child so that it may have extended peace and prosperity.
Okay, lovely. And what do you potentially know about Tag? Okay, I will ask that question again.
Mhm.
What does she know about Tig's death?
For that, like, you kind of see, like, her face go, like, very internal, like, trying to see what she can recall, trying to see if she can, like, glimpse past reality to see anything outside of what her, like, seat as the Fae Court would give her. And then she responds, "It is not in my nature to understand the plans and schemes of man. However, from glimpsing through history, the living saint was not yet ordained for the time of his passing."
And then my final question would be, if you were to name one person who might know about his death, who might it be?
Yeah, for this one, you see her waiting a very long time and, like, going through all the possible answers, like, just saying, like, what permutation would maybe lead you to the best outcome. And after a couple seconds, she responds, "While being far from a person, Miss Katonic may have the most insight. She may not have the most insight, but she will be the most willing to share. Mind, however, you are kind to both her and her family. She is similar to us, but also maintains being something much far older." And then you kind of see, like, she starts to fade away, and as she does, you just hear, like, on the wind, "If you would like my blessing, place your hammer in the reflecting pool." And then you see it, like, fully fades away.
And I will go and place my hammer in the pool and see what happens.
Yeah, you place it in there, and after, like, a couple of seconds, you see the water start to, like, shape it as though, like, kind of like when you, like, touch a puddle and, like, the ripple happens and you see, like, things distorted through it. You see the water, like, shimmering and distorting the image, and then when it settles back down, your hammer has largely stayed the same, but the color of it has changed to a very, like, icy looking blue with, like, threads of dark black and, like, starlight inside of it. And your hammer now has the same power of night and change that you do. And it's now a magical hammer, and it has a couple different things that it can do that I'll let Nori reveal when Nori feels the time is best.
Haha. Cool.
Cass, that leaves you. What are you up to?
So, following the events of the ball, Cass would have sort of shifted his focus to the academy, looking to truly understand and try to gain more knowledge in what exactly he signed up for with his pact with his patron. That being said, Cass Cass did approach Randolph Carter, since he's the head warlock professor, and sort of try to gain information about the college itself, like what's required to trying to assume that payment or some type of requirement is needed to join, would have been is his approach.
Yeah, and as you get there and kind of start conferring with him, he lets you know that the school is largely based on merit more than anything else. And as such, all of the colleges are publicly funded so that the whole country can benefit by having those who deserve to be the brightest minds excelling without the difficulty of income.
Sort of listening and paying attention as he's sort of explaining the situation, Cass unusually trusts this character more than he seems most. He seems to be able to relate to this person enough, or understand that this person is in this position for a reason, and aside from the party, he decides to not try to hide his identity in this situation. And over the next few days is working with Randolph Carter, trying to understand his pact. He also presents Raycon's contract to him as well, just as something to look into to try to get a better grasp of what is happening there.
Okay.
But aside from that, he would have been diving into the libraries that are available and looking up anything he can find about genies, and just in this area, like what would have brought his specific patron here. And following that, he would again try to commune with his patron.
Yeah. And so, as you're investigating the libraries and trying to find things, specifically about genies, you get the feeling, and also just from other patrons who are around, and not patrons, other warlocks who have patrons around, that genies are not one of the main sources of power other people have like drawn their power from. And so, looking into it less from like a genie specific and more entity specific mentality, you're able to find in the library different documents from the Sunken Cove written in Aquin. So someone will easily translate them for you if you go to like the library staff. But they tell the story of a god that was trying to be born just at like a time when the tides would change and something went wrong, and two entities ended up possessing the same body. And due to like the chaos of trying to be two contrasting ideas at the same time, the body wasn't really able to hold itself together and was ripped apart in some way, and not really sure what to do. The people of the Crescent Isles and the people of the Sunken Cove built different temples related to the two aspects of this deity, and the hope that they could either be contained, or they could be saved, or they could be trapped. Not really understanding the magic that was happening, they built them more out of security than actual any sort of like religious affiliation or any sort of upholding. And I think that would really relate to you and like what you're understanding. I think that would be something you use to start communing, is like these ideas of change, these ideas of duality, just any sort of thing that you could find in Cass that relates to what you're reading about this entity, and seeing if maybe it's something you can talk to.
Yeah, and sort of using that knowledge, Cass does try to commune with his patron at least one time, and that fails from just sort of not really understanding what his relationship is. But following some more internal reflection, Cass decides to go into his bottle of respite, which is sort of his like demi-plane where he can retreat to for a set amount of time each day, and reflects in there as well. And upon that one, I believe he's able to commune.
Yeah. So you're like mid meditative trance trying to commune with them. When you open your eyes and look up, and outside one of the windows, in like a very watery visage, is some sort of like fish man looking thing. It's like a very large creature that has like whiskery faces of like different, like almost like catfish like. But it's, while there's one entity in front of you, you look like it's two different things being superimposed on top of each other. And it seems like they're kind of fighting to see which one is the most present at any sort of time. You have one that has like a very soft facial feature that seems very kind and welcoming in a very light blue, and then there's one with like a much angrier expression. It's weird to see like a fish being angry, but a lot angry and a lot more intense expression underneath it that seems to be one trying to push out. And that one's a very dark navy. And they speak to you in your mind in a language you at first don't understand, but just through like the sheer force of them wanting you to know what they're saying, you immediately understand Aquin. Your whole life you would now understand how to speak Aquin, and they look up to you, letting you kind of know like they don't have much time before they can't be maintained anymore, and to ask anything you want to ask quickly of them.
So, hearing the instructions, Cass still approaches cautiously, as just his characteristics, but taking a quick second to ponder, Cass starts by asking, so first question Cass comes up with is, what happened to the two of you? And very obviously casting some inflection on the two question, trying to decide from their answer if there are one or two beings specifically.
Yeah. And so they respond to you, and as like you're especially paying attention to whether or not it's one or two beings that are talking, you see that they start to talk, and as they do, both mouths and both facial expressions move in the same capacity. That seems to imply that even though it's being said twice, it's only coming from one sort of like brain or one sort of thought. And the first thing that you would hear them say is, "We were born into the same time and place, when our creation was meant for the changing of tides, but we met at a moment where neither had won out. Trying to contain both calm and chaos was tearing our vessel apart, so we split ourselves into two, and we were sealed in two locations."
Sort of same process. Cass sort of sits back, just sort of absorbs what he was told while really diving into like what they looked like when they were saying it to try to determine if it was one face versus the other specifically that's saying this. Following that up, Cass asks how their vessel / lantern, sort of pointing to the area around him where they are sitting currently, ended up in the abandoned building in the forest he found it.
Yeah, so once again, they start speaking with the same like idea of the two of them as like one thought process. "Our vessel is the key to unsealing one of our tombs. A pilgrim of our past was on a pilgrimage to us when he was attacked. He found shelter in which to hide, but did not recover, for he never made it to the safety of water. As his body laid there, so did the lantern, until a day the next person picked it up."
And at this point, Cass sort of just grabs a small journal that's just in the planar area that he's in, and just prepares to start writing some stuff down while he sort of contemplates his third question, which, following just taking some notes, he looks up and he asks the figure what specifically they're looking for from their pact and what they / he is expecting of Cass himself.
Yeah, so you hear them start to talk, and they're like again talking in that unison, and then there's a moment of like an intense pain and radio static in your head. Go ahead and make a wisdom saving throw.
4.
Okay. So in this moment, for Cass to fully understand what they're saying, he'll have to pick one side or the other. Which one do you think he listens to and tries to understand?
Cass focuses primarily on the lighter persona, the one that seems to have the more calm and tranquil demeanor.
Okay. Yeah. Coming through now, like hearing one voice clearer, kind of sounding like hollow, and though it's missing some of like the undertones of when you heard the voice as a duality versus a singularity. Here it go. "We need you to bring us our lantern to the temple in the Crescent Isle. Allow for me to return to bless the waters and provide sanctity once again against the creatures who hope to breach reality through the dark, cold, and watery depths." And as he says that, you notice like they as a duality start to like fade out again back into like the water visage that is outside of the windows of your lantern.
Sort of taking in that cryptic message, Cass writes down what was relayed to him specifically and sort of puts that journal into just a shelf that's appeared in the area. And like sort of through this whole experience, Cass sort of understands a little bit more about his abilities and what this area is, and is able to control it a little bit more to certain extents. So he like knows that he can sort of control it to show what he wants, more or less, to a certain extent. Not create items, but like a bookshelf appears and he's able to set the book on there for future reference. But following this conversation, Cass just sort of rest, understanding that it's a lot to take in, and just takes a quick short rest after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end of your short rest, as you're kind of like putting things back into place and the area is becoming more your lantern than just a lantern you occupy. You look down in the center, and there's a nice folded cloak that has a bright, like bluish toned pearl embedded into one of the clasps of the cloak. And I think you would have an innate understanding of what it is just through like the power that gave it to you. But we'll let Cass figure it out when Cass feels like you can let others know what he found.
Yeah, and sort of following that conversation, Cash just sort of continues on his way. He talks with Randolph Carter just a little bit more and gets a little bit more of an understanding of the social hierarchy of Solana and the land itself, as well as a little bit more information into the backgrounds of what people think or how their thought processes are in regards to these classes in general. But Cass will sort of relay that to the group when deemed appropriate.
Okay. Cool. Nice. Then let's all now, we'll fast forward time through everyone reconnecting to one point, and you all will wake up in the morning. You all have your own separate bedrooms, but it's kind of like an ensuite thing where, because again, you're in the guest wing of the royal manor here, where there's 4 different rooms that all connect into a middle room that has like a living room and a kitchen and everything. And you're woken up by the knocking that you have known to come to mean that Clark, the waiter, has come to greet you all for the morning. And so you all wake up and hear a knocking at the front door.
Oh, well, I guess it's time to get up and go to breakfast. Thanks, Clark.
Do you go and open the door?
Yeah, I'll go open the door.
Yeah, as you open the door going, thanks, Clark, you see Clark's not here today. Dion's back. He has been gone into Paternelle, having to be part of the ceremony of appointing James Whitmore, and as such, he had to do that as like the first paladin of the church. And you open up the door saying, thanks, Clark, and he laughs and goes, I wish someone as good as him could greet you in the morning, but unfortunately you're stuck with me today. I wanted to apologize for not being here and just kind of check in, see how things were going. I've heard a lot about you, Frog, from from Julian, but I'm not so acquainted on all of you as a group or the other two, so I wanted to come say hi and see what was going on. Can I get all of you to make a perception check, please?
9.
15.
24.
Nice. All of you beat the thing needed, and you see behind Dion, Julian's trying to like do that thing where he like sneakily goes up behind someone as though he's gonna like jump on them or surprise them or something. But he like gets up and Dion just goes, I know you're there. You should know by now. I can sense when you're there. And he's like, ugh, damn it. And you just see him kind of run up, like wrap his arms around Dion's back, give him a little kiss on the cheek. And he'll say, aw, if you keep being sweet like that, people will think you care about me, in like a very playful manner. And they're both here to see you in the morning. He kind of looks at you, Frog, and is like, hi.
Yeah, Frog will like grumpily get out of bed and just like walk over and be like, hi.
Frog continuing to not be a morning person.
I think that when Nori opens the door and realizes, as Dion is obviously saying these words, her body language is going to go from like positive to chipper and be a little bit more sullen because she was really excited to see Clark again this morning. And then have her body language chipper up a little bit more and invite them into the ensuite and see if they want to sit down and chat a little bit for Dion to get to know Nori and Cass a little bit more.
Yeah, they accept your invitation, and Dion is very like good at reading people and kind of senses your disappointment. He's like, I apologize. If you would like Clark, I can easily call for him to come and sit with us.
Oh no, it's okay. Just sometimes when my expectations aren't met, I get a little bit sad. But I'm still really happy to see you. I just was happy to see Clark, or excited to see Clark, because he's a bright shining soul in the universe. Have you thought about giving him a little bit of a raise?
I can. He's paid the traditional salary, but if anyone believes that we are underpaying our staff, we would gladly make sure that they rise further ahead to meet any sort of living crisis or sustainability they would need.
Oh.
And at this
Oh.
point, Cass interrupts this conversation, like sort of walking out of his room, being like, "He's compensated fine. She just got a good night's rest and is a little more bubbly than normal. Don't mind her."
I was going to say it. He doesn't say anything about how he's not compensated well. I'm just saying I think he's doing a really good job, and well, I also come from the Fae realm, so things were a little bit different there. But he's okay. I really appreciate your forthrightness and ability to think about others in this situation when you are such a great leader. And Nori's gonna like try and fade into the background and let Cass kind of take center stage to talk for a little while she goes to sip some. Is there coffee in this realm? Is that a thing?
Yeah, there's coffee. There's whatever
Perfect.
you want. We have brunch and mimosas. You can get coffee.
Okay, well, he goes to grab some coffee, being like, "Does anyone want any?" and sips.
As she leaves, Cass just sort of looks and under his breath is like, "Oh, great, caffeine, just what she needs." But following that, he'll turn his attention towards Dion, not in an aggressive way, but Cass being sort of a skeptical person by nature, and sort of understanding that Dion is sort of trying to perceive Cass. Cass is also gonna try to do more perception on him to see what he's trying to do here specifically.
Yeah, that would be more insight than perception, but go to make it.
Alright. Insight. 18.
Yeah, you get the read that, like, he's not here for any performative measure. Like, he feels bad that he invited you to live at his house and then went away for a week. And also he, like, kind of knows a bit about Frog just from the communication he has with Julian and everything, but doesn't really know the other two. So, like, he's not coming to you in a skeptical way, but he is kind of coming in that manner of, like, you've all been staying in my house for a week, and I should probably know who and what you are in case people ask about the guests I've been housing. So nothing, like, coming with any sort of agenda or any sort of, like, animosity, but definitely just like a, I want to know who you are sort of thing.
Sensing this and realizing you may have been reading into it a little bit too much, Cass will stop and just take a deep breath and put his hand out and be like, "Congratulations again, and thank you for accommodating us for the past week."
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm hoping that you all had a good time, and you all seem relatively unscathed, so I imagine nothing came for you or anything. Yeah, I'm happy to provide any resource and care I can. Thank you for the congratulations. It's a night we would rather have gone differently, but won't hamper our feelings about it in any real capacity.
So, on that note, or having seen Cass's demeanor change a little bit, Nori's gonna come over with her coffee and just sip it a little bit and say, "So speaking of the night, did you expect, Tig's death? Tig's death?"
Yeah, he kind of looks at you as though it's like, it's not a weird question to ask, but it's not a like, "Hey, we're really happy you're wed. Do you know why he's dead?" Again, it's that typical Nori flow of questioning that catches people off guard a little bit. And he kind of says like, "No, it's honestly like, for a man of his stature and ability, he would have died at a relatively young age, one would predict. So the fact that he's dead is something that came as a shock to many of us, and something that I'm not really sure. I mean, it shook a lot of people in Paternelle. Certainly have been shaken by the fact that they lost the religious leader and one of the founders of the church, if not considered the founder of the church. And I know for a few people it briefly brought into question the security of the crown and church's relationship. But we would hope that the new high cleric James Whitmore, who was there at the party, would be just as willing and participatory in the maintaining of peace as his predecessor was.
Well, I'm really sorry about his death. He seemed like a really cool dude. The only reason I ask is because at the party, I just seemed to notice a couple people's reactions, and so yours was not one of them, aside from it being filled with sadness and surprise. I just mean more of people's reactions in terms of not to be expected or not typical. And so it's just kind of piqued my interest over the past couple days of why those individuals may have not seemed as shocked. Especially one.
If you don't mind, do you concern it to be an issue of security, or are there people you believe we should be looking out for? Or are you trying to say that people were expecting it? Like, I mean, it's a good insight to have, but it's also a strange thing to bring up.
I don't necessarily know if it would be of danger for anyone per se, like especially for the new High Cleric, but Bellman, Jarls Farrells, as we have discussed previously, correct? Like at the party, or someone mentioned to Dion that this guy was trouble. Okay.
Told Julian about it. You don't know then if Julian went on to tell Dion or not. You can assume, because they seem to tell each other everything. But yeah.
So, yeah, Nori would continue and say, Charles Farrells didn't really seem that surprised. And so, and also Cassiopeia, she didn't seem too surprised either. And so it was just, those were two things that I wanted to bring to your attention in case there was anything additional, especially this Jarls Farrells man. Frog will speak to it probably. He's just not a good dude. And so if he, like little lowly man, right? Like not a lot of people seem to like him anyway, had something to do with poor man's death, that would be horrible. And Nori's just going to continue sipping her coffee and waiting for the reactions.
Frog, are you going to try and save her from this conversation?
No, but as she's saying all of this, Frog in the background, like, you know, not too far away, but is just gonna be like under her breath, like, fucking Jarls, Farrells, Fellman, fucking Jarls, and is just gonna be like under her breath, really, really angry.
Yeah.
Can Nori perceive that?
Yeah, go ahead. Give it a try.
Oh, give it a
Frog,
try.
Frog, are you trying to hide it, or do you think you'd let it? Yeah. No roll than needed. You can tell. And I think everyone in the room can kind of tell. And Julian gives you a look like, I know we're close, you're not close. Calm it down. As you're just saying we should assassinate a minor lord to the prince. So you get that nod from Julian, and I think he kind of steps up to cover for you, Frog, being like, I think what our friend here is trying to say is that they discovered some really unnoble actions and unkind behaviors to the people in the city of Fel, which, of course, Dion, you know, was recently taken from your estate and given to the one Lord Bellman. I don't know where Jarls Farrells comes from, but Jarls Bellman's estate was the one of which they refer, and I know we didn't get the most time to talk about it, but we really should look in some sort of royal audit into maybe what he's doing with the land and maybe what some of his plans are, because it's very reminiscent of the pre-war chiefs that his actions are taking. And I know, especially if we are concerned about support for the church remaining through the ideal of peace, having a noble acting as a pre-war chief will not help the most. And you see Dion like really take that and goes, that's not a bad point. We can schedule a royal audit. It's not unheard of for the crown to check in, make sure nobles are paying their taxes, make sure they're not trying to hide anything. Yeah, he hasn't, as far as I know, been audited recently. We can definitely look into that if you believe it's an area of concern.
I mean, I would say so, just in case. And if not, well, I guess you just messed with him again, which he doesn't seem too bothered by anyway. I think he kind of realizes that not a lot of people liked him, at least at the party, from what I could tell. But yeah, that would be great, and maybe keep us updated. If there's anything we can do to help, let me know, or let us know. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I will keep you all in mind and be running a state affair. If there's anything applicable, you will be not anywhere near the top of the list to be told, but you will be on that list, and information necessary will be given to those it belongs to. I appreciate, young fairy, your investment in making sure things stay well. And I know you and your kind have their own systems and your own customs and your own hierarchies and structure. And we have those as well. They're just a little more paper laden than yours, and sometimes information can't move as quickly from mouth to mouth as we would rather it does. But you'll be on that list. And then to kind of try and get out of that conversation, he's going to be like, yeah, I hear you've been gallivanting around town making friends and finding new skills. Is there anyone that you need me to give you a penned invitation to, or do you need help getting anywhere? Is there any sort of thing you all need some help or aid with?
Cass looks around the room and sees Nori and Frog not really having much to say, it appears.
The only thing that Nori probably would question would be if we need to go, or if we need a letter to go see Mrs. Katonic. So she'd probably bring that up to Dion and ask, because we all seem to have a piqued interest with her during the party.
Yeah, Dion would let you know. It's while in town, Miss Katonic's state does not fall under any part of Solana law, or at that point Aelith law in itself. She is an entity onto her own, and if you believe it would be helpful, I will gladly pen an invitation, as she is an upstanding member of the community. But historically, anyone that needs help or anyone that needs to talk with her is always just welcome at her estate, and you can go see her whenever you need. But like I said, if you feel more comfortable going in with a reason, I will gladly pen you an invitation.
Well, based on that information, it's okay. I really appreciate the offer. Cass, what did you seem like you needed to say? Ask. Say. Ask. Ask, say. And then Nori's gonna start shaking with the coffee cup and be like, I think I'm gonna go for a walk.
I should not have introduced caffeine.
Cass is like, yeah, that's probably a good idea, and just sort of pats her on the head and sort of guides her to the door. As she leaves, he turns his attention back to Dion and Julian, and in a more serious tone, sort of asks them specifically, is there anything we can do for you? You've been extremely accommodating to us and our party, giving us a place to stay, sort of letting us get the lay of the land here for little to nothing in terms of repayment. Is there anything that we can do for you at this point? We appreciate the generosity and the continued support, but as with anything, relationships are not one way. So if there is something we can assist with, and again, sort of going back to the uncomfortable conversation, looking at Dion, and understanding that we are not going to be privy to all information as soon as it becomes available, is there anything we can assist you with, given the current circumstances?
Yeah. To that, Dion responds with, Well, honestly, the relationship has already been effectively two-sided, as your sweet Phrygiana has done the kindness of keeping my friend here accompanied throughout the week, as I'm sure she would be want to tell you if they felt it was her place. People in town aren't necessarily the kindest to those who they see as their idols when they can talk about them behind their back, and just having someone for Julian to have connection with means a lot more than anyone would ever realize it would while I'm away. And then you kind of see like Julian getting to the point where like he very much agrees with what's being said, but doesn't want the conversation to be about him, goes, but also, there's nothing stopping me from saying something a little too early, as I am not yet officially a member of society, so maybe if something really needed to be leaked, I could have a couple bottles of wine with Frog, and she could maybe learn something through the slip of a tongue, and no one would be any the wiser. And then looks at Dion, and then before he can like get reprimanded, just kind of again like hugs him really tight and like pulls him back to try and make sure he gets too distracted before yelling at him. You feel like this is probably a tactic Julian uses a lot when he says something that isn't technically wrong but isn't right, especially with Dion being so like by the book and knowing what needs to be done. It's kind of his way of being like, you can't get mad at me, you love me too much, and like interrupts the thought process through acts of affection.
I feel like, just as an aside, Cass would probably have the same reaction as Dion would have to Julian, just sort of being like, and like in his mind, like this is a good thing for us, but also I could see why Dion would get frustrated by this at the same time. But Cass would just reiterate and say again, well, we understand, and turning back to Frog, that we are great company, as she's still sitting in the chair in the back a little bit, but if there is anything that would come up, we would be more than happy to assist. We don't want to come across as freeloaders, especially given the conditions you are letting us stay in, sort of making a gesture to the what Cass would assume is a relatively nice house for the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think from there he would very much like just kind of let you know that if you are all very willing, he'd expedite the audit so that he can get you all an answer early, and then we'll like kind of go off and pen you an invitation, Nori, for Miss Katonic, whether you need it or not. He feels like he's helped you all more by doing it than not giving it to you, and so they kind of go about for their day. Julian reaches out to Frog and is like, when you're back, let me know. I'd be excited to hear about it. And then like drags Dion out of the room. And you all are free to do whatever you want.
Nori's still a little amped on caffeine. Is gonna be like just like twitching for like another 5 minutes while talking. And she's gonna say, well, maybe Twitch, we should go and see Miss Katonic Twitch.
Frog is gonna kind of like walk up to Nori and just like look in her cup and be like, what's in there? What you got there?
Cass sort of seeing where this is going. He's just gonna look at Frog and be like, no, please no. One is enough.
I'd like to point out, it's a full human-sized cup of coffee that little 3-foot Nori is downing.
Yes. Frog will look over at Cass and be like, just one sip.
Cass just goes back to her room.
Cass, no, come back.
Just as they're still sort of just discussing in the living room, Cass is just going to be in his room, be like, I'm coming back, just give me a second, I'm getting ready to leave.
Nice. Okay, and yeah, you all leave. You're able to go like through the streets. Again, you're like up in the royal palace, like up in the high part of the city, the upper city, and you make your way out past the market, past the like amphitheater, down to the walled gates, and on the way through, especially Cass, you knowing, and Frog, you knowing the like bars and taverns of the lower city, but Cass knowing specifically like where Miss Katonic's home is, you're able to lead pretty easily your companions to go to her estate. What would you all do when you get there? A reminder of what it looks like. The exterior has like very large, like gothic black spoke fence, and then the inside is a house that appears to like be pulled out of time. It doesn't look anything like the architecture around it. It doesn't look like anything else any of you have seen in the like world. For us as players, it looks very much like the Addams Family Manor or like any sort of Dracula castle, but like in a Victorian estate. If anyone's played Bloodborne, looks a lot like it'd be in Yarnum. And it's kind of that vibe, just in the middle of town. And Cass, you know a couple of secret exits and entrances inside and outside from your time here prior, but you would also like know how to just politely go up to the front door, which would be like going through those like large wrought iron gates, walking in. There's like a play area where there's a bunch of children's toys, and then there's like it's like a well where people would draw water from, and then just like a large yard for anyone to be around in, all in that central courtyard. As you walk up, it would imagine like if it was something that wasn't an orphanage, this would have a lot of statuary. It would maybe have like a hedge maze. It would be a lot more fancy, but she has not maintained the outward appearance of wealth. She's just allowed it to become a place for all of her family to play around.
As we approach, Cass, having been here before, but not been the main person that's interacted with her, just sort of in his past, he's just going to look at Frog and Nori and just give them just a fair warning, like, she's an interesting character, and just choose your words carefully as to when we are talking to her. And with that, Cass would just sort of go through the gates and start approaching in a polite way, like not trying to sneak or anything, but not running up to the door either.
Yeah. You make it up to the front door, and you are just able to like, use the knocker to open it. After a couple of like seconds, I think probably feeling longer because of all of your anticipation. But after a couple seconds, like the door opens, but right before it does, you feel like the air around you start to get colder, almost as though like time is slowing down. And it's not that like the air is changing temperature, but your body's perception of heat is changing. And you open the door, and there's just a woman that appears to be in like her mid to late 30s, standing there, again with her hair very done up in a nice tight bun, like wearing a very simple gown. And she looks up and goes, "Regina, Cassius, Nori, a pleasure to see you all once more. What would you like? How may I assist you this day?"
Frog is gonna, like, visibly just, like, shiver.
Regina, would you like a blanket? It's a rather nice day, but if you're cold, we can always provide you a meaning of warmth.
Frog, just still being creeped out by all this, is just not gonna say a word, but just, like, slowly shake her head no.
Seeing Frog's sort of like guttural reaction, Cass, as slightly as possible, casts prestidigitation and warms up the area around her just to get that chill off, and then looks at Nori just in a way of calm, collective, before turning back to Amy and asking her just to have a quick conversation about the events of the party and see if she has anything she can provide, as well as if we have anything we can provide to her.
Well, yeah, if you would like, you're all welcome to come in. I can have tea made, and we can sit down in the parlor and have a discussion on the events of that night. I know it was rather interesting, and I'm assuming you have questions. As Miss Nori here, I saw you staring at me, knowing that I may not have been as surprised as you may have expected, but that's okay. I assumed you would come asking at some point, but if you'd like, you're welcome to come for tea. And like she steps aside and like opens the door more for you.
Castle walked through saying, "That sounds lovely."
Miss Katonic, I'm so sorry. Do you potentially have caffeine-free tea?
Yes.
Would it be okay if I had one of those packets? I've had a little bit too much caffeine this morning.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I'm just gonna look at Cass and give him a thumbs up.
Because like most of the inhabitants of this home are children who should not be having copious amounts of caffeine, so it's not uncommon for uncaffeinated teas and beverages to be provided.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Frog is gonna just like walk through the door, but kind of shift it as far away from her as possible without it being too obvious.
Yeah, I won't make you roll for it. Mostly because, and I think Frog intuits this as like Amy's eyes watch you move, no matter how hard you try to hide it, you're not going to.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and you're all set down. You see, like, you guys hear just like kids playing around the house. You see a couple kids like running around, and as they're like running through the parlor, she goes, "Remember, children, you mustn't run, for running can cause grave illness. We do not want injury to ourselves or our spirits." And then like pats them on the heads and allows them to continue on. And then just like floating through out of nowhere, a couple like saucers full of tea come and sit down in front of you, followed by like packets of like tea leaves that you all can pick from and choose your own teas.
When we're walking through,
Mhm.
and all the children that we see, do they all look humanoid, human-like, so to speak?
Yeah.
Not thinking what Amy is herself, just in terms of the orphanage for like Nori's perspective. Would there be any like fey-looking like folk?
None that you see. Most of them just seem to be like young children. And I think, Cass, you probably would have prepped the other two beforehand in your prepping, that a lot of the like people that are in her house are children whose parents died in the war, or just like children whose parents couldn't afford things after. So it's a lot of like humanoid children from the area who, for some reason or other, needed some place to go, and she took a lot of them in.
Okay, cool.
As we sit, Cass sort of takes note of the floating saucers, trays, teacups, all thing, and very casually just sort of grabs a cup of tea, a little bit of sugar, and acts as if this is very natural, like a normal phenomenon. And as he sits just looking at the group, he'll look to Amy and ask, before we get to brass tacks here, how are you doing all of this, like motioning to all of the stuff floating in the room?
Well, it depends on what you define by me. Like, am I able to project myself in many certain areas to invisibly bring things around the house? No. But do I have some unseen servants who help keep the home tidied? At times, yeah. Do I have eyes throughout the building to make sure the children aren't getting up to what they need to, and as such can clearly communicate with any part of the house I need to? Yeah, so in a way it's all being done through my will, but I'm not physically doing all of it.
Cass, still playing it cool, but arguably a little creeped out by that answer. Just sort of nods and be like, it is very fascinating.
Before Cass continues with the conversation, Nori's not going to say anything, but she wants to try a thought experiment, and she wants to think in her head, that is so cool. Can you hear me right now? And try and direct her thoughts at Amy or Miss Katonic and see if she gets a response back.
Okay. Cass, go ahead and keep going with your conversation.
And again, sort of just leapfrogging off of that, had been here before, Cass would just sort of casually bring up, asking how the orphanage is doing in terms of funding, and just compliment her on the extravagance of the building, not mentioning the sort of like rougher exterior that was described, but just sort of complimenting her on how many kids are here, how well the area is still kept up for considering the amount of people.
Yeah, she responds, and while she's talking to Cass, Nora, you see her eyes look over at you, and just like a sparkle goes across them. She's not going to say anything, but she lets you know that she knows. And back to Cass, she says, well, yes, it's always very polite, and as you know from your own past, I won't delve too much into it, because I'm not sure how much of it you've shared with your companions. Some of your brothers and sisters have been part of the family, and family members are constantly donating for upkeep, and will work in different means to help us stay afloat where we are. So we appreciate the generosity of the family at all times, and we make sure it goes as far as it can.
And sort of seeing Nori sort of like act weird, Castor sort of raises his eye and is like, okay, whatever. But following that conversation, Cass will say, speaking of donations, and will take a small bag he had prepared before and hand Amy just a small little satchel filled with 20 gold pieces, being like, to the continued support of your orphanage and hopefully continued good relationship between our group, and hand it over to her.
Yeah, she like takes it and says, Cassius, this is most kind, thank you, and like just takes it in her hands and then like seems to go to like put it on a table, but there's no table there, but instead when she puts it, it just kind of like drops out of reality and doesn't like hit the floor. It's just the money is gone somewhere.
As this is all happening, Frog is gonna be like very clearly like still like creeped out by her. Is just gonna be like, excuse me, Miss Katonic, is there a restroom here that I could use?
Why, of course, yes. George, and she summons a small child who comes up and he's like, yes, miss. She's like, can you please show our friend here to the nearest restroom? I believe she needs to relieve herself of some kind. And the kid looks up and goes, Georgie can do it, and like very much like will take your hand and like lead you to the nearest bathroom.
Okay, as this is going on, I'm gonna kind of be searching for like other children as well, like to kind of see. Frog does not actually have to go to the restroom, but kind of was like trying to check in on the children and see what the vibes are. Knowing that Miss Katonic has eyes everywhere, she's gonna like kind of get some stuff out of her bag. Like, I mean, she is going to give the children the toys and stuff, but to mask this conversation a bit, she'll have like a pack of marbles and then like a little deck of cards and stuff to give to these children and kind of be like, Miss Katonic is the best, isn't she? Just to kind of like see what their reactions are.
Yeah, I think as you're handing out toys, like a gathering of like 20 or so children appear around you, and they're like, toys? Well, the miss makes sure we get several toys, but yours are different. Thank you kindly, and yes, we very much appreciate our madam and the head of our house. She's a very kind woman, and she shepherds us all to where we need to be, and we are all eternally grateful for what she does for us.
Frog is also going to ask them if they ever get any visitors.
Yeah, we have visitors all the time. Sometimes it's people who come to join the family. Sometimes it's people who need information from our kind overtaker. Sometimes it's our brothers and sisters coming back just to check in on us and make sure we're okay. We have lots of visitors.
Have you had any visitors recently besides us?
I don't know the last time we had a visitor. No, it was probably a couple of days ago.
Do you know who it was?
No. Unless we get asked to help people around, we kind of stay out of the way because it's really important for all of us to stay safe, that she knows what's going on, and so she checks that people are okay before introducing them to us most of the time.
That's great. And then she'll take out like another hacky sack or something and give the kid that one. And then she will go to the bathroom and tell the kids to go play.
Nice. And as you're doing that, can I get you to make me an investigation check with advantage, please?
Okie dokie. Advantage. Okay, good thing I have advantage. Okay, 19.
19, nice. For as much as Frog is chaos incarnate, you're also like very smart and calculating, and like you take in fine details and stuff, and as you're walking up, like you got a pretty good scan of the house, you know the size of it. As like you're like meeting these kids and they keep coming out of their bedrooms and stuff, you're doing the math in your head. This hallway is longer just going like from where you were to the bedrooms than it could ever possibly fit inside of the wing of the house you saw from the outside.
Okay. Good to know.
And then when you're done, Georgie's like, I can take you back, miss. And like is ready whenever Frog needs to return. What do you think Cass and Nori were doing as Frog goes to do what Frog did?
Nori, having noted the twinkle in Miss Katonic's eyes, will just be thinking over and over again, either tea leaves, so that way she keeps her thoughts nice and clear, or you have to teach this to me someday. I will be so grateful if you could. And she'll like alternate between those two thoughts, but then attempting to not look weird.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Nori can be intelligent sometimes and wise. So, wait, am I intelligent? I don't know if I'm intelligent. I think I'm wise. Sorry, I'm not very intelligent, but I'm very wise. So yeah. Nori, with her infinite wisdom, would probably know how to do this.
Yeah. And as you're like doing that, and like you know that mind reading magic is there. Like Frog has detected thoughts on people before. Like you know how it works. Like the surface level thought versus like the actual probing into it. You see as like Amy takes a sip of it and goes, Cassius, I apologize that your companion is trying to have a private conversation. And if she allows for it, I'd be happy to just have it out here in the open.
Well, okay, so I wanted to see, Cass, if she could read my thoughts. Because, you know, Miss Katonic, I've just been told you're such a cool person. So I wanted to see. And so I did. And she can read our thoughts, which is just so cool. And so I've been thinking either tea leaves or I would be so grateful if she could teach this to me one day. Because, Miss Katonic, this is so cool. And oh my gosh, this tea. You'll have to tell me where you got it. It's just so good.
Cass, before she responds, is there anything Cass does here?
Cass just gonna grab that little piece of area, like on the bridge of his nose between his eyebrows, and just sigh.
Okay, yeah. She responds, well, the tea is... I brew it myself. I have an entire atrium of plants where I grow different herbs and different teas that I can use to make my own. I can gladly teach you how to make it if you would like. Although I have a feeling that, as you were thinking, you must teach me to do this someday, you did not refer to my tea-making practices. And if you would like to have a greater understanding of the world as it truly is and how things function, I would be glad to help you in your journey to be joining the family and understanding how the world is meant to work.
That would be so cool. And wait, that sounds like really pretentious. I don't mean it to sound that way. I mean it to actually sound genuine.
Uh-huh.
like a genuine Nori, grateful. That would be so cool. That's probably more like how it would sound. She would then continue to say, I'm sorry for my forthrightness. I've had a little bit too much caffeine, as I said earlier, and I'm just a little bit of a bubbly personality. I just wanted to let that be known because sometimes Cass seems to tell me I need to tone it down because we are not in the Fae realm, and so I just want to make sure that you're not bothered. If you are, I will tone it down even more.
Frog, you return at that.
Following that little monologue by Nori there, understanding what Nori was doing with the thoughts, Cass will think to himself while still looking at Amy, just so you know, she's going to write a page about you in her journal later. So, just some food for thought here.
Oh, I'm aware. Her journal is quite interesting. I would be fascinated to see its actual contents, but I can see it on her now, and I was able to do a cursory glance of it already.
Did you looked, wow, you are just so fascinating. This is so cool. Thank you for inviting us into your home.
You're welcome. And Frog, I hope you enjoyed Georgie's company. He can be quite a sweet lad, can't he?
Yes, he can. It was delightful. As like as Frog heard that Miss Katonic was looking through Nori's notebook, she's just gonna like gently place her hand over the letters that she has pre-written to her siblings.
Well, I wouldn't pry at anything I felt is not meant to be seen. It's based on Nori's personality, and also I need safety. I wanted to make sure everything was safe, but Frog, a lot of your contents have an aura around them of secrecy and seclusion, and I would never pry at that without being invited to, unlike Miss Nori, who has an air of openness and never a thought to not be shared.
Frog will just look over at Nori and then back and will be like, "Thank you."
Yeah. Well,
Nori will just say, "Fair."
Well, Frogena, I'm not sure you heard the conversation had between your companions, but Nori was hoping to learn more about the workings of the family, and I have a feeling all of you have questions, and if you would like, you can begin the process of understanding, and then if the process is successful, we can all work together after, and I can share information with you.
Process?
Nori. Oh, go ahead, Frog.
That was all she had to say was process? Question mark.
And Nori's gonna look at Cass and just wait for his response and just smile at him.
Sort of seeing the uneasiness in the other two, Cass just sort of sits up straight, gets more involved in the conversation again, and asks Amy, "What exactly are you referring to?" I feel like we're not inherently against anything. We're not sure what this process would involve.
Oh, my apologies. I had assumed that you would have heard from your siblings, or that people in town would have spoken ill truths about me before you came to meet. But I, at least for some of you, know that the questions you are trying to find are questions that may be hard to swallow or hard to understand. And before revealing information about your world now and also the world for the truth of how it works, it's often best for people to enter with a clear mind, which means confronting their own secrets of the past. And so if you all wish to learn things that I can offer, it wouldn't be necessary, but it would be quite pertinent for you to confront your own thoughts beforehand. And the process simply allows for you all to engage in self-reflection before understanding what's to come.
Nori would kind of look at both of them and say, "I'm open for some self-reflection, but that's also just me respectfully what Miss Katonic already said. I'm kind of an open book, so nothing really bothers me."
Cass will chime in as well, saying, hearing the sentiment, saying that's fine with him. He's, again, got nothing to hide, and sort of look to Frog to make sure she's okay.
Frog, being more reserved, will just kind of like stare at Cass and Nori for a moment, thinking, and then she'll just be like, "Okay, I guess."
Yeah, seeing no resistance, she's like, "Well, if you'd like to follow me, I have made special chambers where one can relax comfortably and experience the self-reflection. If you would like to do it individually, it is at its core a individual journey, and you could all have your own separate rooms, or if you'd rather, you all can embark on self-discovery together. I'm happy to do it either way. It has no bearing on the outcome."
Knowing Nori's personality, Cass will give a quick glance to Nori, seeing that she's probably fine with either, but quickly shift his glance to Frog to see if she has a preference, just based on her personality.
Frog is like kind of torn between the two, but she thinks that her like the creepiness of Miss Katonic and not wanting to be alone is winning, so she's gonna go for a group session.
Nori will nod and grab both Cass and Frog's hands and skip to the room together.
Nice. As you're skipping to the room, she just kind of trails behind you, and you hear like the sounds of giggling echoing through the hallways, as it seems like a bunch of children that are unseen have a really fun time interpreting your skipping. All of you, go ahead and make just a straight wisdom check.
Bless it.
Haha, I am so wise. Don't feel. Oh, I'm gonna guide myself as well.
Okay.
Ooh, 19 plus 7 is
12.
28.
10.
Okay. So Nori, you are the only one that really pieces it together, but you kind of like, you are someone from a different reality. Like, you've walked through planes, like you're from a different place. You kind of think for a second, like, why can I hear all of these disembodied children, but why can I not see them? And you kind of get a feeling that, like, while this house appears to have, like, the capability to be infinite, it can only support so many people at one time. So you think probably the rest of everyone else is at some other plane that can just view into it. And so the reason you can't see the kids is because they're currently in a separate reality, but experiencing things along with you.
And Nori, realizing that, will continue to skip. Maybe a little bit more exaggerated now. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, and then you all make it to the room. You go into a nice, like, room that has very dim lighting. It's got very fluffy beds, and it's got, like, a mister in the middle that's, like, very much like a dehumidifier type mister that's slowly just, like, putting out, like, silvery, like, it seems like waves of silver smoke are coming into the air, but then lingering and, like, floating around the room, as well as just, like, a black mist is boiling over the sides and going down. And she's like, feel free to lay wherever you would like, and I understand you all wish to embark together, so that being in the same room will allow for that.
Nori will go and lay down directly on the mat in the middle, or like 3 wherever the middlemost one is.
Cass will just go, set his stuff down at one of the open ones, no specific one, but we'll take off his robe beforehand, just leaving his normal clothes without the billowiness as he lays down.
Okay.
Yeah, Frog will head to the last mat, walking kind of slowly.
Nice. As you all lay down, can I have you roll initiative?
What the heck?
I just wanted to determine what order these scenes are going to take place in.
Okay.
9.
20.
And Frog?
10.
10. Okay.
Also, what in the world did you skipping down the hallway, leading Frog and us by hands look like? Cass is almost 6 feet tall.
Well, Nori would have like also floated a little bit with her wings.
So you were just
So then, like,
floating up and down as you were going forward.
So it was like kind of like slow motion, and then like limb differences in terms of just how long your arms are versus my arms versus Frog's arms. It would have probably been like left, right, left, right, left, right, left.
Okay, yeah, so you all lay down, and as you lay down, like, that smoke that you see in the air kind of makes like a very hypnotic and mesmerizing pattern, and you slowly feel yourself falling asleep until you start to feel very warm. Like, that sense of, like, cold and time stopping around you fades away, and you all feel very comfortable, like you're floating in a great expanse that seems to have no beginning or no end. It's like a void that's just very comforting and wraps itself around you, kind of like a very nice weighted blanket, until you start to see like very hazy images coming in from beyond the veil. And the first thing that you all see together is a giant mushroom. And like after you look a little more, you see a couple giant mushrooms around it, and then you see dragonflies and butterflies flying through the sky. You see great trees that seem to have their roots coming down from the sky, so that like the top of the tree is not too far above height, and you could easily like fly up and pick an apple. And Nori, you would immediately recognize this as an area from the Feywild that you spent a lot of time in your childhood. The other two, you might recognize it from the descriptions of the Feywild you've heard before, but I think what would really cement it in is that after a couple seconds of this image coming into frame, you see Nori, someone who looks a lot like Nori, and then another young boy all like running in, bouncing on the mushrooms and seeing who could use it as like a trampoline to fly highest in the sky. And Nori, why don't you tell us a bit about Nori's childhood?
So this is Nori playing with her older brother, Riker, and then Riker's friend, Apollo. And it was in one of their favorite mushroom patches, mushroom areas to play in. And it was often a place that Nori visited after Riker had passed from the war to help recreate fond memories of all three of them together, but also just her and Riker together as well.
Yeah, and then after a moment, you see it kind of like a slideshow fades in and fades back out, and you have a moment of the three of them a bit older, back in the Fey circle that Nori currently lives in. And you see at this point they're more like adult age. Like they're probably still, because fairies, somewhere in like their early 60s, or like maybe late 60s, early 70s, but they still look like they're 20 or 30 or so. And you can see that again, they've grown up. You've got Nori and Riker, who again look a lot like each other, as well as Apollo, who's kind of like now grown into his body. He was like a really shaggy kid. Now he's got like that build to him. He's got some like longer blonde hair. He's got some very like striking hazel eyes that imply that like while he might be living with all the water fae, he might like historically have been from like a woodland fae or someone that works more with nature than they do water. And as the day is just kind of passing back and forth, you would see that Nori and Apollo keep kind of like making eyes at each other and like finding reasons to stop and talk with each other, finding little reasons like, oh, we should both work on this project, or oh, we should both work on that project. And then after a couple of times that happening, you see Riker pull Apollo aside and be like, she's my sister, leave it alone. And he's like, man, I can't help who I'm going for. And then they laugh, and again, that slideshow fades, happens a couple more years later, to the day of Nori's wedding, where you see Nori and a human friend standing at the altar, and then Riker and Apollo standing at the altar as Apollo and Nori are wed. And Nori, why don't you tell us a bit about your wedding day?
Within the Fae, typically weddings are held a little bit more privately, and then like an after celebration. So a ceremony, and why is the word not coming to me? It literally, thank you, reception. So sorry. Reception afterwards is where the big party happens. And so the ceremony itself was very intimate. And so Apollo's background was more, or not background, but heritage is more of like woodland fae. So there was lots of greenery while also having some water elements within the decorations. And so it was just both of our families, Apollo and our family, and very close friends. So about a 20-person intimate ceremony. And we exchanged vows. It was very sweet. We had a little bit of time to ourselves afterwards. And then about an hour later, it's custom for Faye in the reception to have like an all-out banger for a couple days. And so everyone in the village was invited, and so everyone partied for a couple days, and Nori had a lot to drink and a lot of Faye wine, but it is a memory that she looks back fondly of.
and kind of through that haze of like memories being recalled from a night that maybe had a bit too much substance obscuring the memory, the next one seems to have the same lack of tangibility, almost as though Nori only knows it from it being recounted to her by other people. And you all see an area you all would know now, a field full, well, not full, but at this point filling with Felfay flowers, as Apollo stands over Riker's dead body, trying to revive him, trying to bring him back home, and a look on his face knowing that, like, he's lost, like, he hasn't lost Nori, but has lost essentially half of his life, and realizing he's going to have to be the one that informs the dad who's off doing combat in a separate part of this fight, but as well as informing his wife that her brother has died. And then I think the last scene that you all come up, Nori, you get to describe yourself. What is it like the day that you all part?
Apollo had been back from war for 20 years. And initially Nori took the news of her brother passing really difficult. That's not how to say the word. Initially, Nori took the passing of her brother really hard. And it really negatively impacted her mental health, but she felt like through the support of Apollo and her family and her human friend, she was really able to move past it. And so it probably took Fae years, it took 5 to 10 years, which may seem like a long time in human years, but for Fae that's pretty quick. But 20 years later, Apollo was still heavily grieving, and he couldn't take the daily reminders of how alike Nori and Riker looked. And so he decided that he needed to end the marriage, which is still a common thing within, or an acceptable thing within the Fae realm for a myriad of reasons. And he needed to go back to his roots and go to where the woodland Fae live. And so it had been a long time coming in terms of conversations and plans made, and both of them were very sad and solemn about it, but in their wiser years of living amongst the Fae for a little while, they knew that for both of them it was the best decision. And Nori still has sadness about the day, but still looks back on the marriage as something of fondness and of having no regrets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Nori, you kind of solidify on those thoughts of like sadness but no regret. We all kind of, the haze moves again to Frog, and a memory of you all seeing through her eyes. It's a moment that you all see of a lot of chaos. It's a lot of things moving. The first thing that comes into display here is a really bright orange color. And as it starts to become more and more detailed, you realize that it's not just the color orange, but the orange and yellow and reds of flames consuming an entire village. You see in the, like, standing at the back end, which probably the person that started the flame, is a woman that all of you can make. Actually, we'll talk about that later. A woman figure that you all would recognize, but you're not quite sure how right now due to the dreamscape coming from Frog's younger mind. And as the camera kind of pans out, you see that different magics are erecting a brick wall around the entire town that will be too high for anyone to get out of, so that anyone in town will be trapped by these flames and starts burning to death. And the only people that you really see escaping are a young Frog being carried on her dad's back, and right before she goes, there's a woman who looks a lot like her. If Frog was maybe 10 years older, she'd be the spitting image of this woman, runs up to try and flee with her husband and daughter, and a single lightning bolt comes straight through her heart, and she dies. And as you see her spirit start leaving her body, part of it seems to like hold onto Frog as though she's trying to hold her hand for one last time, and some of that life energy transfers into Frog. And Frog, you hear in your head, and the others hear at the same time, "My sweet daughter, I will never leave you. You shall be with me, and I shall be with you for all time." And what does Frog see? Like, what's going through Frog's mind as she's reliving a really suppressed moment that happened when she was maybe 6 or 7 years old.
I imagine that Frog is probably not taking this very well and is like like sobbing probably. So she is obviously she did not know her mother very well and has like limited memories of her, but she always has like felt a connection with her and definitely has some sort of like remembrance of her and like remembers her fondly. So she is like clearly like probably visibly like body moving on her little mat or bed or whatever it is, sobbing.
Yeah. Yeah, and as the sadness of that moment kind of fixates in Frog's mind, the camera pans out one more time to our last member here. And you all see, and first you really smell it. You don't see it as much. You smell like fresh cut grass, and you smell wheat, and you smell corn. And that sensory overload kind of like pulls you into a memory of little baby Cass, maybe about 15 years old or so, just finishing up his chores on the farm and realizing that he doesn't have the last tool he needs for the last thing and going inside. And as he goes inside trying to find it, you see two parents who are inside having a conversation. And you watch as Cass overhears a conversation that goes somewhat along the lines of, he's old enough now that he should know about his real parents. Like, he should know that they died valiantly and that while we try and protect him, that while of course we're his real parents, that we can only do so much for him if he ever starts asking questions and all. And then the mother going, well, yes, but at this point it's been so long. Don't you think it would do more harm than good for him to know? And don't you think we should just maybe let him know at the end of times versus right now? And Cass, you are standing outside of a door, and what did teenage Cass do in this moment?
Sort of making this revelation and the motions of his teenage years, like, he understood and subtly expected this to a certain extent, but it still sort of mentally broke him at that point in his life. He ended up leaving that window shortly after that, not wanting to hear more, and working on the farm for the rest of the night until, like, pretty much his hands were calloused and bleeding, just keeping his mind off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that next morning, the parents would come out, like, just trying to see where you're at and find you, like, asleep in, like, a hay stack in the barn. And they look down and go, Cassius, you brought some friends over. And they seem to be perceiving all three of you.
Cass, sort of having a weird, like, out-of-body experience at this point, like, looks up, still seeing he's, like, in his 15-year-old body, but seeing Nori and Frog, and knowing that that's from his, like, current life, like, current timeline of where he is sort of just confused and not really sure what's going on at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they look down and they go, we haven't seen you in, what, 2 or 3 years? Come on in, we should all go eat breakfast together. And they seem to be, while it's teenage Cass they're talking to, they seem to be talking to adult Cass and the two of you at the same time.
So Cass just sort of reflecting and realizing it has been accurately like 2 to 3 years since he's been home, sort of not energetically, but more enthusiasm than Frog and Nori would have seen in the past, gets up and sort of walks in that direction, sort of reflecting that despite everything, despite them not being his true parents, after that night he still saw them as his true family. Like, he never knew anything different growing up, so it didn't change his reflection of, like, who they were to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you all go down and sit down. Nori and Cass, you see, not Nori and Frog, you see, like, teenage Cass here but understand in the same way that they're perceiving him as he is now. Yeah, you all sit down and like a whole southern breakfast is provided to you. Like, got like the hash browns that have been cooked and are very much salted from being fried, and like the bacon grease to give them a little bit of a meat flavor. Definitely over salted, but it comes out to like the perfect crispiness. Some fresh bacon from the farm itself, some fresh eggs that are brought in, and then a nice bread that was made from the milled grains. And you all sit down, and they don't seem, other than the statement of like identifying you're both here, they don't really seem to be including you in this, kind of from an idea that it's built off of Cass's memory and he doesn't remember you being there. So while you're part of the scene, you're not being perceived fully. And they go on to continue, and they're like, well, we just wanted to let you know that you were definitely a highlight of everything we could have done. Um, the taxation was hard, and we understand why you left to put the nobles in their place, and understand why you needed to go. But we just wanted to let you know that not a day went by where we weren't talking about how fun you were to raise, and how good you were to have on the farm, and how much you were part of your family. And we wanted to just be able to give you the goodbye that we didn't get to fully give you. And so we thought, a nice meal together is a nice way to be sent off.
Cass still slightly confused as to what's happening, and if this is sort of a image of his natural wants, like what he would truly want from his family, given his life as it is currently. Sora just looks down and sort of in the ways that they normally would back when he was younger, would grab Nori's and Frog's hands and just sort of like bow his head to like give thanks for the meal and thank his parents for everything they did in the past. Sort of squeezing Nori and Frog's hands as he's saying this, realizing they would realize he's getting more emotional than he normally does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as you're doing that, your parents again kind of focus, and they're like, well, I'm so happy that you came back to see us, and we know that what's about to happen might be rather hard for you and your companions to be seen, and to fight through, but knowing that you look back on this with only love in your heart, and knowing that we're always the memory of your true family, we thought we could give you a little bit of a boost, and go ahead and eat up, and we think it'll make you feel better about what's to come.
Cass raises his eyebrow and just blurts out loud what's to come, like in a questioning way.
He says, well, in order to accept the reality of the world, you need to look inside, and while you are able to look inside yourself and find some of your secrets in a very nice and caring way, the same cannot be said for everyone that undertakes the process, and they need to confront their past in one way or another. And as we are not to be confronted, we can't be there to aid you, but we can be there to give support before we say goodbye one last time.
Cass, still being slightly confused as to what they're referring to, just sort of thanks them and would get up, sort of go embrace both of them, just in a real natural hug from what he would have done in his past, and give them just a tight embrace before letting go and looking back to Frog and Nori.
Yeah, you let go and you look back to Frog and Nori, and then when you look back to your parents, and when you look back, they're gone, and the house seems to have aged as though it hasn't been upkept in the same way it could have when they were young, or when you were younger and there to help them. You see dust is on a lot of the shelves. You see some of the windows have had boards put instead of window panes because due to the taxation they can't really afford it, and all that really seems to be left as darkness starts to come in is those 3 plates on the table of a nice southern breakfast made for all of you.
That's just sort of looks down, realizing what this most likely means, knowing this is still a vision, but understanding that this is probably the current state of his old childhood home, looks to the group, sort of stifling those emotions back down to where he normally keeps them, and pretty much looks at the group and is like, we should go.
Okay. And do you all take the food with you, or do you leave it on the table?
Oh, I apologize. There's actually food there.
Yeah, like there's like a full breakfast made for each one of you.
Oh. I mean, Cass would eat it, for sure.
Nori, following Cass's behaviors, would also then eat the breakfast.
Yeah, Frog as well.
Nice. Yeah, you each gain 20 temporary hit points, and you are under the effect of the Bless spell. And I think we'll call it there. And we'll come back next time as our players decide to confront their past. Thank you all for playing. Thank you all for listening. If you want to get in contact with the show, if you want to try and figure out what you think our players might be up to in the next episode, you can always reach out to us at helpactionneeded@gmail.com, as well as follow us on Threads and Instagram, helpactionneeded in both of those places. Yeah, we just want to thank you all for listening. It really does mean the world to us. It's kind of our little passion project, and seeing it become a community has been super cool. So, good job, listeners. You make us feel good about ourselves, and I'm gonna cut it there. So, yeah. Thank you all for playing. Thank you listening, and goodbye.
What a fun episode.